Single mom tried to pay with pennies for diapers. The CEO behind her froze. She looked exactly. Under the dim supermarket lights, two lives brushed against fate as if the universe had quietly planned their collision. One was drowning in silence, the other frozen by memory. Yet both hearts carried the same hidden ache of being utterly alone. Alina Torres shifted her baby higher onto her hip, her arm aching from the weight but her heart heavier still. The little boy clutched a worn teddy bear, its fur matted and one button eye missing. Yet he held it as if it was the only treasure in the world. She kissed the top of his head, whispering softly to soothe him, though her voice trembled. On the counter before her sat a pack of diapers, nothing else. Just that one necessity, as urgent as air. Her fingers trembled as she pushed coins forward across the conveyor belt. Pennies, nickels, a dime polished smooth by years of circulation. She counted them once, then again, each clink of metal echoing louder than the hum of the checkout scanner. The cashier's expression was blank, practiced, but her eyes flicked toward the line forming behind. Someone muttered under their breath, "If you can't afford a kid, you shouldn't have one." The words stung like a slap, but Alina kept her gaze lowered. Pretending not to hear, she whispered, "Almost there, baby," her lips brushing her son's ear. He whimpered, rubbing his tired eyes against her shoulder. Her chest burned with shame, the humiliation of being measured in cents, of standing exposed in her struggle while strangers looked on with pity or judgment. Behind her, Damien Voss froze. He had walked into the store expecting nothing more than picking up a bottle of water and a late dinner he didn't need. His world was sleek, controlled, sculpted out of glass towers and boardrooms. But in this moment, staring at the woman before him, he forgot who he was supposed to be. She looked exactly like someone he had lost long ago. His sister, Leora. Her dark hair, the delicate curve of her face, the way her eyes held a storm even when she tried to stay composed. It was as if Leora had been pulled back from the grave, reborn in this struggling woman's form. Damien's chest constricted. His polished shoes felt rooted to the floor, as though the ground itself had shifted beneath him. The cashier's voice cut sharply through the haze. "You're still 73 cents short," Alina's breath caught. She dug into her coat pocket, pulling out a few crumpled receipts, lint, and finally one more coin. A nickel, still not enough. She blinked rapidly, her throat tightening as she whispered, "Can we just put it back?" Her voice cracked on the words. The baby stirred, letting out a soft cry that tugged at Damien's soul like claws. Without realizing, he took a step forward, his hand already reaching for his wallet. "I'll cover it," he said, his voice steady but low. "Not for the room. Only for her." Alina stiffened, her head turning slowly. Her eyes lifted, and for the first time they met his. Her gaze was wary, fragile but strong in a way he hadn't seen in years, the kind of strength born from surviving too much. For a moment, Damien forgot the coins, forgot the diapers, forgot the people around them. All he saw was her, and the uncanny familiarity of her face that stirred a memory buried so deep it had nearly suffocated him. "You don't have to," she began, her pride instinctively rising, but her voice faltered as her baby whimpered again. Clutching at her collar, Damien shook his head gently. "Please, let me." The cashier looked between them, then began scanning the diapers again without question. Damien slipped his card onto the counter with a composure only years of power could grant him. Yet inside, his heart raced unevenly. Alina stood frozen, caught between gratitude and shame. She had promised herself she would never accept pity. Life had taken too much already, her marriage, her savings, her security. She had chosen silence over asking for help, even when nights were cold and her baby's cries carved her hollow. And now here was a stranger, a man who looked like he belonged in magazines, offering to carry the weight she had hidden for so long. Her lips parted, words fumbling out. I'll pay you back." Damien's gaze softened. "You don't owe me anything." For the briefest moment, something flickered in his eyes. Not pity, not charity, but recognition. A shared loneliness she couldn't quite name. Alina's chest tightened, her defenses trembling as if his gaze could reach places she had locked away. The cashier bagged the diapers, sliding them across. Damien picked them up before Alina could, holding the plastic handles as though they were heavier than stone. He offered them to her carefully, his hand brushing hers. The contact was brief, accidental, yet a spark shot through both of them. Her hand was small, chilled, calloused from labor. His was warm, steady, lined with strength but unfamiliar with struggle. Their eyes met again. For Damien, the world blurred. The shelves, the customers, the hum of the lights, all of it dimmed. He saw only her, the woman who carried the shadow of his sister yet wasn't her, the woman who radiated quiet endurance, who stood in line with pennies and a baby and dignity still intact. He had built empires, bought silence with money, controlled every storm in his world, but here he stood, undone by a stranger. Alina lowered her eyes first, clutching the diapers close to her chest as if they were both shield and prize. She whispered, "Thank you," so softly he barely caught it. Damien wanted to say more, to ask her name, to keep her within reach before she vanished back into the crowd of ordinary lives he would never see again. But his throat locked. The CEO who commanded boardrooms with ease could not find words for the trembling woman before him. She turned, her baby's head resting on her shoulder, and walked toward the automatic doors. The chill of the evening swept in as they opened, carrying her away. Damien remained rooted, his pulse thrumming in his ears. He had come to buy water. Instead, he had found a ghost wrapped in flesh and sorrow, and he knew, with a clarity that startled him, that he would not let this be the last time he saw her. Outside, the wind tugged at Alina's hair as she adjusted her grip on the bag and tightened her coat around her son. She breathed in the cold night air, steadying herself, but her eyes burned with unshed tears. It wasn't just the humiliation of pennies or the sting of judgmental whispers. It was the look in that stranger's eyes, like he had seen her, truly seen her, when she had grown used to being invisible. She kissed her baby's forehead and whispered, "We're okay, Matteo, Mama's got you." Yet her heart whispered something else. Who was that man? And why did his eyes feel like they carried her pain? Back inside, Damien stood at the counter, his hand still on the empty space where her coins had been. He closed his eyes briefly, hearing her soft thank you echo like a promise. A memory surfaced uninvited, his sister's voice years ago whispering through smoke. "Don't let go, Damien. Don't let me go." He had let her go. He had been too young, too helpless, and she had slipped away in the fire. But tonight, staring at the back of Alina Torres as she disappeared into the night, something inside him stirred with fierce determination. He couldn't save his sister, but maybe, just maybe, he could save this woman, and before he even realized, Damien Voss, a man who had never chased anyone in his life, found himself walking toward the doors, the echo of her voice, her eyes, and her fragile strength pulling him forward into a story neither of them could have imagined. The night after the supermarket encounter, Damien sat in his penthouse apartment, a glass of untouched scotch on the table beside him. The city glittered beneath his windows, endless towers stabbing into the clouds, lights blinking like stars trapped in steel. To anyone else, it might have looked like power, like triumph. To him, it was a prison of glass. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his mind replaying the image of the woman at the checkout. Alina. He had caught her name when the cashier muttered it faintly as she completed the transaction. Alina Torres. He whispered it to himself, as though tasting it might make sense of the strange ache in his chest. Her face haunted him, not only because she looked like Leora, but because of something else, something deeper. There had been strength in her humiliation, a defiance in her bowed head, as though she refused to let the world strip her dignity, even when she counted pennies for diapers. Damien closed his eyes. He should forget her. She was a stranger, a moment, a fleeting crack in the carefully built wall of his life. Yet every time he tried to push her away, her image returned. The sound of coins hitting the counter, the way her lips trembled when she said thank you, the way her baby reached out for her collar, as if she was the only safe place left in the world. Meanwhile, Alina sat in the cramped warmth of her small apartment, the heat barely humming through an aging radiator. Matteo slept in his crib, cheeks rosy, the new diapers stacked neatly beside him like a tiny mountain of security. Alina brushed her fingers over the pack, her throat tightening. She had sworn she wouldn't cry again, not tonight, but the tears came anyway. Not because of shame, but because of kindness she hadn't expected. That man, tall, controlled like he belonged in a different universe, had stepped in, and for once she hadn't felt invisible. She hated herself for remembering the intensity of his eyes, for the way his presence lingered in her chest long after she walked away. She wasn't looking for a savior. She couldn't afford to, but something about him had pierced through the numbness she wore like armor. He shouldn't have been there. He knew it. This wasn't his world. Yet as he watched her move through the shelves, quietly picking up only what she needed, he felt something stir that no boardroom victory had ever given him. She wasn't greedy. She wasn't desperate. She was careful, deliberate, as if every choice carried weight. She looked tired, yes, but she radiated a strength that drew him closer. Alina felt his eyes before she saw him. She turned, startled, nearly dropping the small box of formula in her hands. Her heart raced. "You," her voice caught. Damien offered a small, almost apologetic smile. "We meet again." Heat rushed to her cheeks. She clutched the box tighter as though it was a shield. "Why are you here?" His gaze softened, steady but not invasive. "My company funds this center. I come sometimes to see how things are going." It was the truth, though not the whole of it. Alina shifted her weight, torn between suspicion and an odd flutter that unsettled her. "You didn't have to follow me." "I didn't," he said gently. "But I'm not sorry our paths crossed again." The air thickened between them. She wanted to look away, but his sincerity rooted her. No pity in his eyes, no smug satisfaction of a man who thought he'd done a good deed. Just recognition. She exhaled slowly, looking down at her son. Matteo squirmed in his stroller, kicking his tiny legs. Damien's eyes softened even further when they fell on the child. "What's his name?" Alina hesitated. "Matteo." He crouched slightly, careful not to come too close. "Hi, Matteo." His voice was gentle, almost reverent, and for a moment Alina's defenses faltered. She had seen rich men before, men who walked with entitlement, who treated the poor as invisible. But this man, this CEO she remembered vaguely from a news article, was looking at her son as if he mattered. The moment lingered until Alina forced herself to break it. "I should go." Damien straightened, nodding though reluctance flickered in his eyes. "Of course, but may I ask you something?" She paused, wary. "Do you work nearby?" Her lips tightened. "Why? I only meant—" He struggled for words, unfamiliar territory for a man used to commanding every conversation. "If you ever needed a mechanic or childcare support, I know people. No strings attached." Her jaw clenched. "I don't want charity." His chest tightened at the sharpness of her tone. But instead of pulling back, he nodded with quiet respect. "I understand." She turned and walked away, the wheels of the stroller squeaking, Matteo giggling as though the tension didn't exist. Damien watched her go, his heart sinking but also igniting. She was not someone who could be bought, and that, strangely, drew him to her even more. That night, Alina lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She replayed the look in his eyes, the way he said her son's name. It unsettled her, how much she wanted to believe in the gentleness of a man like him. But she couldn't. She had learned too harshly that people's kindness always came with a price. And yet as Matteo's soft breathing filled the room, she couldn't push away the image of Damien crouching, speaking to her son like he mattered. Meanwhile, Damien sat at his desk, the city asleep beyond his window. His assistant had left reports stacked neatly in front of him, numbers and contracts demanding his attention. But all he saw was her face. All he heard was her voice. He remembered the way his sister had looked at him when he was a boy, how she had trusted him to protect her, how he had failed. And now here was Alina, carrying a strength that mirrored Leora's, yet shining with her own fire. He felt the old wound reopening, but for the first time it wasn't just pain. It was a call. Days blurred into weeks. Damien found reasons to be near the community center more often. He never pushed himself on her, never crossed the fragile line she held so tightly. He watched instead, quietly ensuring that supplies never ran short, that repairs to the building were handled swiftly. And when Alina walked through those doors, his heart always steadied and unraveled at once. For Alina, life was still a struggle. She worked shifts at a diner, returned home to her small apartment, rocked her son to sleep with whispered promises of better days. Yet despite herself, she began to notice small changes. The center had more formula stocked. The heater that had been broken for months suddenly worked again. Volunteers arrived with new strollers, warm blankets, things no one had bothered to supply before. She didn't know why, but she felt the invisible hand behind it, steady and quiet. And sometimes, when she caught Damien's eyes across the room, she wondered if she dared believe it was him. One rainy evening, she found herself leaving the center with a bag of supplies when Damien appeared at the door, holding an umbrella. He said nothing, simply extended it toward her. She hesitated, every instinct telling her to refuse. But the rain was cold, Matteo whimpered, and for once she let herself accept. As they walked side by side beneath the umbrella, silence stretched between them, but it wasn't heavy, it was warm. For the first time in a long time, Alina felt something stir in her chest, something dangerously close to hope. And Damien, his shoulder brushing hers under the shared canopy, knew he was already lost. Rain lashed against the diner's fogged-up windows as Alina wiped down the last table of the night. Her back ached, her feet throbbed, but the thought of Matteo waiting for her at home pulled her forward. The babysitter had called earlier, saying he'd been fussier than usual, feverish. Alina's chest tightened every time she thought about it. She needed to hurry, but her boss kept her late, muttering about closing duties as though she were a machine and not a mother desperate to get home. When she finally stepped out into the storm, the wind cut through her thin jacket. She rushed to her car, an old sedan that coughed more than it roared. Matteo's face burned in her mind, his flushed cheeks, his tiny whimpers. She turned the key, begging the car to start. It sputtered, shuddered, then died. Again and again. The steering wheel trembled under her hands as she smacked it, tears blurring her vision. "Not tonight," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, not tonight." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She answered quickly, expecting the sitter, but froze at the deep, calm voice on the other end. "Alina?" She swallowed hard. "Damien? How did you— You gave your number at the center last week for supply updates," he said quickly, almost apologetic. "I'm sorry for calling so late, but I was nearby and I thought," her voice cracked, "my car won't start. Matteo's sick. I need to get to the hospital." There was no hesitation. "Send me your location. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Alina's pride screamed at her to say no, but Matteo's fever burned hotter in her thoughts, louder than her shame. Her fingers trembled as she shared the pin. Within minutes, headlights cut through the rain. Damien's black car slid to a stop beside hers, its sleek shape alien in the rundown parking lot. He stepped out, coat already soaked, eyes locked on hers with quiet urgency. "Where is he?" "At the sitter's." Her voice shook. 5 minutes away." "Get in." She slid into the passenger seat, clutching her bag like a lifeline. Damien drove with steady control, though his jaw was tight, his eyes focused. When they reached the sitter's house, Alina rushed inside, emerging moments later with Matteo in her arms. His small body was limp, his skin too warm. Damien's chest clenched at the sight. Without a word, he opened the back door, helping her secure the baby seat she carried. Then they were off again, slicing through the storm toward the hospital. The drive was silent but thick with unspoken fears. Rain hammered the roof. Tires hissed against flooded streets, and every so often Matteo whimpered weakly. Alina pressed her forehead to her son's, whispering soothing nonsense, but her eyes glistened. Damien glanced at her, seeing her desperation, and something inside him cracked. He had seen numbers collapse, markets crumble, entire industries shift under his decisions, but never had he felt so helpless as watching this woman cling to her child. At the hospital, Alina barely waited for the car to stop before unbuckling Matteo. Damien was at her side instantly, his coat shielding them from the rain as they hurried through the automatic doors. Nurses swept Matteo into triage, and Alina followed like a shadow. Damien stayed a step behind, his presence quiet but unwavering. Hours blurred together under fluorescent lights. The doctor finally emerged, his smile reassuring. "A fever from an infection. Nothing serious. We'll keep him under observation tonight, give him fluids. He'll be fine." Relief hit Alina so hard she almost collapsed. She pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming freely now. Damien stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that she could feel his steadying presence. She whispered, "Thank God," her voice breaking. In the dim hospital room, she sat by the crib where Matteo lay, tiny chest rising and falling more easily now. Damien stood in the corner, hands in his pockets, as though he didn't belong yet couldn't leave. At last, Alina looked up, her eyes swollen but fierce. "You didn't have to come." His gaze held hers. "I know. Then why?" He hesitated, searching for words. He wasn't a man used to exposing himself. "Because no one should go through this alone." His voice was low, but there was something raw in it, something that startled her. Her defenses wavered. She wanted to tell him he didn't understand, that he couldn't possibly know what it felt like to balance the world on pennies. But there was no pity in his eyes, only recognition, as if her pain had touched some wound of his own. "Do you know what it feels like," she whispered, "to sit there counting coins while people stare at you like you're dirt?" Damien's throat tightened. He stepped closer, his voice steady but edged with memory. "Yes?" Her eyes widened slightly. He nodded once, slowly. "My family. We weren't always wealthy. There were nights my mother cried over bills, days we lived on bread and soup. My sister, she hated the looks people gave us." His voice faltered on the word sister. and Alina caught it, the shadow that crossed his face. She didn't press, but something inside her softened. She looked down at Matteo, brushing his damp hair gently. "People think I'm weak," she murmured. "A single mom with nothing but scraps to her name. But they don't see how hard I fight for him." "I see it," Damien said firmly, the weight of his conviction startling even himself. She looked up at him, and in the dim hospital light their eyes locked. Something fragile passed between them. No pity, no charity, just truth. The moment stretched, fragile and electric. Then the door opened, breaking it. A nurse entered, checking Matteo's vitals, smiling softly at Alina. Damien stepped back, but his eyes lingered on her, unwilling to let go of the connection they had stumbled into. The next morning, as dawn broke pale and gray, Alina stood at the hospital window, watching raindrops streak down the glass. Damien had stayed all night, waiting quietly in the chair beside her, though she hadn't asked him to. When she finally turned to him, exhaustion in her face, she whispered, "Why are you really here?" He held her gaze. No mask this time, no practiced composure. "Because when I saw you that night in the store, it felt like the world stopped. Like fate was saying, don't look away. And I can't." Her breath caught, her heart thundering. She wanted to deny it, to push him away with words about different worlds, about how men like him never stayed. But the sincerity in his voice rooted her to the spot. She said nothing, only turned back to Matteo, though her hands trembled slightly. That day when they left the hospital together, photographers were waiting outside. The flash of cameras startled Alina, Matteo tucked tightly against her. Questions flew like arrows. "Is this the woman, Mr. Voss? Are you helping her as part of a company image? Is she your mistress?" Alina's stomach dropped, her face pale. She tried to shield Matteo, but the words cut deep, humiliating her all over again. Damien stepped forward instantly, his arm shielding her from the crowd, his voice sharp. "Enough." His glare silenced the frenzy for a moment. He guided her to his car, ignoring the questions, every muscle taut with fury. Inside, Alina's hands shook. "This is why I can't be near you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't let my son grow up as someone's scandal." Damien's chest ached at her words, but he didn't argue. He only looked at her, his eyes heavy with something unspoken. "I'll fix this," he said quietly. She shook her head, tears spilling. "You can't, not this, not us." The car fell into silence, the storm outside easing into drizzle. Alina stared out the window, her reflection fractured in the glass, her heart caught between gratitude and fear. Damien gripped the wheel, his jaw tight, knowing this was only the beginning of a battle neither of them could yet name. The storm of flashing cameras and headlines did not die easily. For days, Alina avoided looking at her phone, avoided the whispers in the neighborhood when she carried Matteo to the corner store. Articles bloomed like weeds on every screen. Billionaire CEO Damien Voss spotted with struggling single mother, speculation swirling about scandal, pity, image building. Some called her lucky, others painted her as a gold digger, a woman who had trapped a powerful man with a child that wasn't his. Each word cut into her chest like glass. She stayed away from the community center, stayed away from anywhere she might cross paths with him. Every instinct told her to protect her son from that storm. She had survived humiliation at the grocery store, at work, in life itself. But this was worse. This was her boy's future being written in cruel ink by strangers. But Damien did not disappear. If anything, the headlines only hardened his resolve. In boardrooms, investors whispered some advised distance image repair, but he dismissed them with a curt shake of his head. He wasn't about to let the world dictate the truth of what he had seen in Alina's eyes. One evening, a knock sounded on Alina's door. She froze, heart pounding, fearing reporters had tracked her here too. But when she opened it cautiously, Damien stood on the other side, his suit abandoned for a plain jacket, his eyes tired yet steady. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice brittle. Matteo perched on her hip. He exhaled, the weight of days in his chest. "Because you shouldn't carry this alone. Not the whispers, not the shame. None of it belongs to you," her lips pressed tight. "You don't understand. Every look, every headline, I do understand," he cut in softly, his voice low but firm. "Because they've done the same to me. They've twisted everything I've built into stories that sell. But this, us, it's not their story to tell." Her defenses trembled, but she shook her head. "You can't fix this." Damien stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers with a fierce gentleness. Then let me stand in it with you. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by Mateo's soft babbling, his small hand tugging at Alina's hair. She blinked back tears, whispering, "I'm so tired of standing alone." Damien's throat tightened. Slowly, carefully, he lifted his hand, brushing his thumb over her cheek. "You don't have to anymore." The words sank deep, but before she could respond, Mateo sneezed loudly, and both of them laughed, the sound fragile but real. For the first time in days, Alina felt the knot in her chest loosen. She didn't invite Damien inside, but when he left, she found herself holding on to the warmth of his presence like a lantern in the dark. The next day, Damien called a press conference. Cameras and microphones crowded the hall, reporters eager to pounce. He stood tall, unflinching, his eyes sweeping across the room. "I will not allow lies to tarnish a woman who has done nothing but fight to raise her child with dignity," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "Yes, I was with her. Yes, I helped her. Not because she asked, but because she deserved compassion. She owes me nothing. I owe her the respect of standing here, telling you that she is not a scandal. She is strength. And if you cannot see that, it says more about you than about her." The words struck like thunder. For a man known for icy control, it was a rare glimpse of fire. Reporters shouted, questions flying. But Damien walked off the stage without another word, his jaw set. That night, Alina sat on her couch, Mateo asleep beside her, and watched the clip on her old laptop. Tears blurred her vision, but they weren't tears of shame this time. They were something else, something dangerous. Hope. 2 nights later, Damien sent her a message. "Meet me tomorrow morning. Rooftop. There's something I need to tell you." She almost didn't go. Pride and fear warred inside her, but something stronger pulled her there. When she stepped onto the rooftop of the glass tower that bore his name, the morning sun broke over the skyline, painting the city gold. Damien stood near the edge, the wind tugging at his jacket. When he turned to her, his eyes were stripped bare of all masks. He reached into his pocket and held out a bracelet, its silver links worn and scratched. "This belonged to my sister," he said quietly. "Leora. She was younger than me, brave, beautiful. I lost her in a fire when we were children. I couldn't save her. I've carried that guilt every day since." His voice cracked, the memory raw even now. "And then I saw you. You looked like her, but more than that, you carried the same fire. The same refusal to break even when the world tried to shatter you. You reminded me of what I lost, and you reminded me of what I still could have." Alina's chest tightened. She took a step closer, her voice soft. "Damien." He swallowed hard, holding her gaze. "I don't want to save you. You don't need saving, I want to stand beside you, and if you'll let me, beside Mateo too. Not because I pity you, not because I need redemption, but because I see you, Alina. All of you." Tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and unrelenting. For years, she had carried her life like a burden, bracing against pity, shielding herself from scorn. And here was a man who saw through it, not as weakness but as strength. Her hand trembled as she reached out, fingers brushing the bracelet he held. "I've been so afraid," she whispered. "Afraid of letting anyone close. Afraid they'd see me as less?" He stepped closer, their breaths mingling in the cool morning air. "You're not less. You're more than anyone I've ever known." Her heart cracked wide open. She leaned into him, her forehead against his chest, the warmth of his arms closing around her. For the first time since her world had collapsed, she let herself be held. She let herself believe. Weeks passed and the world adjusted. The scandal died down, replaced by other stories, other headlines. What remained was quieter, steadier. Alina began working with a new foundation Damien started, one designed to support single parents, childcare, job training, supplies without humiliation. And he gave her the role of managing it, because who else could understand better than her? She walked through the halls one afternoon, watching mothers and fathers pick up essentials without shame, watching children laugh as volunteers played with them, and her chest swelled with something she hadn't felt in years: pride. Mateo toddled at her side, gripping her fingers, while Damien stood nearby speaking with staff, his gaze flicking toward her often, a smile tugging at his lips whenever their eyes met. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the city in amber light, Alina sat on a park bench with Mateo in her lap. Damien joined them quietly, his arm draping across the back of the bench, his presence steady. Mateo clutched his teddy bear, babbling happily, and Alina leaned against Damien's shoulder. This doesn't feel real sometimes, she murmured. He pressed a kiss to her hair. It's real. More real than anything I've ever had. She turned her face toward him, eyes shining. I don't know what tomorrow brings. But tonight I'm not afraid. He cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away a stray tear. You'll never stand alone again. And as the city pulsed with life around them, the three of them sat together, not as a scandal, not as a story, but as a family finding its way. A single mother who once counted pennies, a man who thought he had lost everything, and a child who brought them both home. For Alina, it was not charity. For Damien, it was not redemption. It was something far stronger. It was love, born from brokenness, reshaped by second chances and bound by the promise of never letting go again.